Hello there. My name is Josh Landers. I'm a student here at San Jose State. I study communication studies and I'm graduating tomorrow. Isn't that awesome? I know I'm pretty excited. So, before I can graduate, I've been assigned this final project. It's a part of my applied activity for my communication studies degree. In this assignment, we were asked to uh, think of new ways, think of 10 different ways, and present 10 different ways we could improve our democracy. So that's what we did. I got creative, I did some research, and I thought up various ways on how we could improve our democracy. On this episode of our extended 10-part series on how to improve our democracy, we're going to be talking about U.S. imperialism and how ending U.S. imperialism or expansion of empire would improve our democracy. So, without further ado, like I said, my name is Josh Landers. I'm a communication studies student about to graduate, and I've worked under the supervision of Scott Lasco for this project. Um, and I hope that you take what I say to heart and think about it a little bit more. So, improving our democracy and U.S. imperialism. So, what is a democracy? Before we could go any further, we have to kind of break down, define terms. What is a democracy? Well, democracy comes from the Greek word demos, meaning people. In democracies, it is the people who hold sovereign power over legislature and government. Although nuance is applied to the world's various democracies, certain principles and practices distinguish democratic government from other forms of government. So there are various other forms of government to this day besides democracy. We have like monarchies and um, like the Communist Party of China, things like that, smaller governments, centralized governments, and things like that. So democracy isn't necessarily worldwide, but because of USA imperialism, it is a little bit more international, if that makes sense. So um, yeah, democracy is a government in which power and civic responsibility are exercised by all citizens, directly or through their freely elected representatives. Democracy is a set of principles and practices that protect human freedom. It is the institutionalization of freedom. Democracy rests upon principles of majority rule, coupled with individual and minority rights. All democracies, while respecting the will of the majority, zealously protect the fundamental rights of individuals and minorities. So, before I go any further, I want to talk about that point. Because a democracy, when we talk about majority rule, that could be a scary thing if it's coming from, um, you know, um, a grandson of Russian Jewish immigrants. When we hear majority rule, that means, okay, if the majority of people think, getting rid of the Jews would be best for the country, then that's what they would do. But it's actually on the contrary. A fundamental principle of democracy is protecting the rights of the minorities and of the individual rights. And I think that's another reason why we got away from the origins of democracy, which was in Greece, where it would be one man, one vote. That would be a direct democracy, right? One man, one vote, gather everyone up. There's an issue, we solve it, show of hands. But it's not that simple, especially when nations grow to be of larger size, like the United States is like nearly 400 million citizens. So in that case, we had to utilize a representative democracy. So what's a representative democracy? What's the difference? A representative democracy, more or less, is where we use our civic engagement and our democratic process to elect officials who can then represent us. An example of this at the national level is our Congress. We elect our Congress people in our district, and then they represent us when it comes to decisions and legislation votes in the House of Representatives. You could say the same thing about the Senate. At a more local level, you could say that about your city council. So we would elect someone from a certain district in our city to go in and represent us in city council. No matter what type of democracy you have, I think there are some certain aspects of it that are very important. One being an educated voter base, an educated society. Another being them being civilly engaged and believing in the political process. But we'll get into some of that stuff a little bit later. So we got to finish up. Um, we were talking about how democracies guard against all power central governments and decentralize government to regional and local levels, understanding that local government must be as accessible and responsive to the people as possible. So that's a reason why representative government works a little bit better, right? Now we can, if we have an issue, we can complain to our city government officials rather than having to send, a letter to Washington, D.C. to solve what's going on here on the West Coast, right? That wouldn't be responsive or accessible. And then last but not least, this is a very important part. Democracies understand that one of their prime function is to protect such basic human rights like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to equal protection under the law, and the opportunity to organize and participate fully in the political, economic, and cultural life of society. So now I hope you have a little bit of a better understanding of what a democracy is, what it encapsulates, what is necessary to have a thriving democracy, and you'll ask yourself, are all the things that we do necessary, and is there some things that we don't do that are necessary, right? So one thing that I don't feel that is necessary is the expansion of the American empire. In other words, U.S. imperialism, right? That's the process. Well, I'll get into that on the next slide. So, what is U.S. imperialism? American imperialism is a term that refers to the economic, military, and cultural influence of the United States internationally. So, American culture seems to be prevalent all across the globe. I think that is one of the results of American imperialism. You can see us go. We have military bases all across the world. We go into various countries and institute our own, forms of government and cultural aspects and things like that. So, in other words, um, it's a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force, the expansion of an empire. The United States, since the late 19th century, that's the 1800s, had created military bases on 80 countries. 80 countries. I can't even name 80 countries. We have military bases in more countries than most Americans can even name off the top of their head. So there's no doubt we're worldwide, and these things they they cost money. They take political backing. Um, a lot of resources go into, um, like I said, the diplomacy or the military force that goes into the expansion of an empire. So, in many occasions, our goal is to challenge and change the culture, implement democracy and capitalism, or access foreign regions. Um, yeah, again, so my belief, the reason why I'm advocating in this video to end U.S. imperialism is because I believe that we have enough problems of our own here in America, as I presented in some of the previous videos. So whether it's problems with our education system or whether it's problems when it comes to like issues of justice. These are poverty. These are all things that can and should be fixed before we go out and try and fix the rest of the world, quote unquote. So I have a little graph here about U.S. imperialism. I'll read some of them, some of the examples, like Hawaii. Hawaii is an example of U.S. imperialism. So in Hawaii, the U.S. wanted more power over the sugar industry, eventually annexed Hawaii without giving them a say in the matter. Annexing Hawaii against their will was not the proper or just thing to do. I think we should have given them a vote rather than just forcing them into annexation. Right? So when we're talking about imperialism, this is not necessarily like philanthropy or us going in to save people that need help. A lot of times it has an economic motivation, right? We wanted the sugar industry, so that's why we were able to quote unquote acquire Hawaii or take it by force. In Puerto Rico, we made them Puerto Rico is another example. We made them a protectorate of the U.S., but tried to Americanize their citizens. Similar to Cuba, in helping Puerto Rico gain its independence from Spain, America was thinking well, but as the American mindset came into effect, we became greedy and started Americanizing the natives, which was unnecessary. So the only reason I put that in there is because it's just very important to understand that imperialism is more than just the military power or the diplomacy that goes into taking control of an area. It also goes into the spreading of our American culture and our American ideals, right? So, how ending U.S. imperialism would improve our democracy? Ending imperialism could be a righteous step towards justice domestically. Not only are we negatively affecting the lives of innocent people in other countries, but we are also sending billions of dollars in resources to provide opportunity abroad, when in reality, millions of Americans need those opportunities and resources. Until every American is housed, fed, given economic inclusion, it is unethical for us to be expanding our empire across the world. More resources directed to those in need domestically would improve the quality of life in people struggling in cities across the country today, the people that would be making votes, the people that we need to be civically engaged in our democratic process. So I think that's my point. Take care of the home before we go out there and try and fix the world, right? I have a quiz for you. Um, what is imperialism? A country in South America, a training method of the samurai, a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force, or the style of meetings the president utilizes? Take your time, and if you said C, then you were right. So yeah, in conclusion, USA imperialism is about expanding our empire across the world and subsequently quote unquote fixing other cultures and trying to improve them. When I believe our focus should be improving domestic issues. Thanks for your time. I'll catch you on the next episode.